Yeah, for copyright purposes, because we're broadcasting live on every platform, I have to avoid playing music. So YouTube doesn't YouTube doesn't flag us and not share our video. So that's the reason why I don't like the silence, but we are live in a few seconds. I am super excited and I cannot wait for everyone to be part of what we are coming out with today. Mm. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the very first edition of this type of event. Normally every year in October in the United States, we celebrate what we call Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And a lot of activity goes on, especially in the city of Dallas here, where we are domiciled. All of our mayors in different cities and municipals, they do their part to ensure that they amplify the voices of survivors, victims, community advocates, and the community at large when it comes to the issue of domestic abuse. And today we are also throwing our little bit of hat into the play to ensure that we do our part as community leaders to also help amplify this message in the month of October. My name is Dr. Oyinkansola Jinodu. I am the founder and board chairperson of the Honey Drops Foundation, and most recently, in about a year or so, Honey Drops Foundation Africa. We took the mission back to the motherland to ensure that we spread the solutions that we have developed in 9 years here in the United States. And we are so proud of the work that is ongoing. For the month of October in 2024, we decided to do things a little bit different, to bring in some leaders, some advocates, some champions of humanity who have been doing the work behind the scenes. And they're very visible in all the communities that they serve. So today we are going to be speaking to and hearing from some phenomenal human beings who have done everything in their power to ensure that not only is this issue of domestic violence a thing of the past, but we continue to move the needle forward every single day to ensure that there is a lot of safety and security in our community. So, ladies and gentlemen, permit me as I get ready to introduce these people to you to ensure that we understand who they are, who they serve, and why they are definitely highly qualified to be here today to speak on the issues that affect us as a people. So first on my list is, I'm going to be talking about this amazing human whom I have known personally, and I am so proud to call him not just a friend, but to also call him a leader of our community. He is Junior Ezeonu. He's the Deputy Mayor Pro Tem. And Junior Ezeonu is a Grand Prairie City Council member representing the entire city of Grand Prairie at large. And Junior was elected to the city council in June of 2021 in a runoff election after defeating an incumbent who had served for 12 years. So he did come in as the underdog. But he didn't just come in as the underdog, he came in ready to serve. Mr. Ezeonu is one of the first African-American council members to represent the city of Grand Prairie since the early 1990s. And he's also the youngest elected councilman. In fact, that was one of the things that gravitated me towards him. I was like, I need to know who this man is. Come on. How is it that we have such an amazing talent, not just being African or being Nigerian? I dare say that to be partial, but just the fact that he is young. And my mission has always been to serve the youth demographic through this foundation. So Mr. Ezeonu, of course, he is also the youngest elected councilman in Grand Prairie to history, still maintaining that record. So, ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome our first speaker for today, who's going to be speaking on men against abuse issues when it comes to the issue of domestic violence. Councilman Ezeonu, you are welcome to the stage, and we are so happy and honored to have you here today. Thank you for serving on this panel. The stage is yours.
Good morning, Dr. O. Good morning to everyone that's tuning in. Chief Morris, it's great to see you as well. And Miss Laredo, it's a pleasure to be with you as well. My name is Junior Ezeonu, and I want to first just congratulate you, Dr. O, for this amazing event. Domestic violence awareness is vital. It's crucial for our community. It's an issue that affects everyone. And we all know someone or know of someone that's been affected. about this issue, and it's sad. It's a very sad thing, and I do look forward to talking about the perspective of men and what men can do to be better partners and allies against this fight, against this struggle. And I just thank you again for having me. And as you stated earlier, I do serve as a council member for the city of Grand Prairie, and our deputy mayor pro tem. Has been a blessing to serve on our city. Our city of Grand Prairie has taken stances against domestic violence. I know that Chief Morris will talk more about this later on, but I'm very, very proud of our city and police department that helped author the Christine Blubaugh Act that was passed back in 2021, passed and signed into law by the governor back in 2021. And Chief Morris will speak more about this, but it's a very significant law that was put into place to provide information and educate students across the whole state of Texas in all school districts about dating violence, family violence, child abuse, and sex trafficking. And as we all know, domestic violence still remains a major issue that affects people that we love and care about. And I want to give you some statistics before I go into the role of men against this issue. To this date, and Chief Morris provided me and the city council with this information just a few weeks ago as we were looking at this issue and how we can address it and provide support to victims and prevent people from becoming victims. But 1 out of 4 women and 1 out of 7 men, and yes, men are included. People sometimes forget that men also are victims of domestic violence from time to time. But 1 out of 4 women and 1 out of 7 men have been victims of domestic violence. Annually in Texas, 200 people are murdered because of domestic violence. Very significant statistics. It's incredible what's happening, and that is still ongoing in our state. 1 out of 4 teenage girls in middle school or high school have been victims of dating violence. And that's why that Christine Blubaugh Act will help address that issue. And the one that shocked me the most and kind of gave me a cause for reflection and to pause for a second and think about this is that on average, and Chief Morris, this was crazy when he told us about this, but on average, it takes an individual 7 attempts to finally escape their abuser. And this may take 1 to 2 or 3 years, or it could be a decade. And this it just takes them multiple years to get to the point of not going back. And I have a personal anecdote in my life of a friend of mine from high school, known this young lady since I was 16 years old. Good friend of mine. We reconnected about a year and a half ago, and she's been in and out of a very abusive relationship. And I try to offer her with support and compassion and just to be there and let her know about the resources that are available and just try to push her out of it. But the thing is, we have to be very empathetic. People that are victims of domestic violence often don't see it like that. I remember a conversation her and I were having about how her boyfriend physically assaulted her. And she made this comment and then stopped in her tracks. She said, yeah, he hit me, but it's not like I didn't do anything to deserve it. And then she was like, oops. And then she paused. I said, no, finish that statement. And in that moment, I saw in her head, the wheels started rolling, and she's seeing that, oh my goodness, I am justifying abuse against myself. And that was like the first time she actually said it out loud. In her head, she's internalized it. And it was just such a eye-opening experience for me being a young male, hearing a young woman, 25, 26-year-old lady saying this. And it was a shocker because a lot of folks that are victims of domestic violence don't view themselves as victims. They view themselves as just people that have made a mistake, and that's why they're receiving retribution from their spouse or their partner. And I think for men, last week I was speaking at another domestic violence event, and I was on a panel with other men. As men, we have to hold our brothers accountable. When we see or hear of anything going on, or even hear of a fellow young man or male, period, that's speaking about women a certain way, we have to check them and call them out on it and be in their face about it. Because too often, a lot of us, especially some of our friends, will say, well, that's not my business. I'm not going to get involved. No, it is your business because we got to look at these young ladies and women, period, as our mothers, as our aunts, as our grandmothers, as our sisters, as our cousins, our nieces. If your niece or your cousin or your sister was being abused, you would not say, well, that's not my business. No, it is our business. We're all in this together. And that doesn't mean that we go and forcibly remove someone out of that relationship, but confront that man and let him know that what he's doing is not right. I know of people who I once called friends of mine who started berating women and verbally abusing women and telling us things about women just in some of the most derogatory and abrasive terms. And I called out this guy that was a good friend of mine. And he got mad at me and said, "It's not your business. Stay out of my stuff and all of that." And I told him, "Well, it might not be my business now, but when you end up in prison, it will be my business. And I'll be reminding you of this. So let's check this and let's fix this now." And with that encouragement, but that tough love, it helped correct him. And he was never a physical abuser, but he was on that track. And being a man that stands up to another man can help deter that. But as well as another aspect that us as men have to help in this struggle and in this fight is to create safe spaces, safe havens for women and anybody, period, that gets abused, but create that safe space. Be empathetic, be willing to listen. A lot of times we just want to act and make decisions for people. But I think we have to start off with just being willing to listen and hear them out and understand what's going on before even making any suggestions. I think through that empathy, through that compassion and understanding and willing to listen, you can help bring someone out of a tough situation. And I think that's our role as men, as male leaders, both within our friendships and our personal relationships, but in the community at large. When we're speaking, I think when we go and speak to young men, when we speak at youth groups, when we speak to the Boy Scouts or whatever, just trying to show young men and men how to be men. Because some of these young boys and young girls grow up in domestic violence families. They grow up seeing a father or mother abuse their partner or their spouse. And unfortunately, hurt people often hurt people. And we have to break that chain, break that cycle to stop it from continuing to the next generation. And as Chief Morris briefed us at City Hall, domestic violence remains one of the issues, even in our city, but statewide, that we have not seen a decrease in the rates. We've seen a decrease in the crime rate across the board with violent crime, nonviolent crime, robberies, and all of that. But with domestic violence, it remains an impediment. And I think because there's still a stigma of people that want to get help. And that's why I'm so proud of so many of the nonprofit organizations that our city, that we work with on a daily basis, that our domestic violence unit, our child crimes unit at the city, our mental health clinicians that respond to mental health crisis calls or calls that deal with anything in that side that need a more compassionate touch. Our city is really working hard, really working hard to destigmatize this issue and help people get the help that they need and deserve, and also prevent these issues from continuing. So, as a man, as a male leader, my number one job is to check anybody that I know that is stepping into a direction that's going to cause harm to others, whether that's his spouse, whether that's his girlfriend, or his or anybody that's close to him, as well as to provide the space, to provide the support for those victims and people that could become victims. And the one last thing that I'll leave y'all with, and then I'll let the next speaker speak. At the event last week that I was at, where we're speaking about domestic violence, one of the things that shocked me the most is that with domestic violence, it's not always just the physical violence. It's not always the verbal abuse, but the psychological abuse that's played into it as well, to where some abusers will do certain things for their partners to make their partners feel like they can't leave them. And they'll cut them off from their families, from their friends, isolate them. And then they start sprinkling in the verbal abuse. Then they start sprinkling in the psychological abuse, creating an ecosystem where this individual feels that they have nowhere to go. And that's one of the most depressing and disappointing parts of this is that the abused kind of get into this Stockholm syndrome where they feel that their abuser is their savior and that they've made mistakes and that they're at fault for why their life is the way that it is. And I think for us as leaders, regardless if you're a male, female, or whatever, we have to we have to provide space and support for these victims and understand that it's going to take some time for someone to fully disengage from their abuser. Some people will do it like this, but many it's going to take them, like we said before, 7 attempts, 7 tries, six failures before they get to that point where there's no going back. And we have to have the empathy and understanding to understand that, hey, the way that we're reasoning right now is not how they may reason because they've been through a lot over the span of months or years. And I'll leave y'all with that and just thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you so much, Councilman. Thank you so much for everything. Thank you for your speech. Your keynote was spot on. Everything you highlighted, everything you mentioned, spot on. And I really appreciate the fact that you had a very strong call to action for our men. And also just understanding that men also need to be aware that this affects them. Of course, they know it does, but the fact that it's okay for men to be able to get the help that they need, knowing that it is readily available to them. I know a lot of men will feel disenfranchised, feeling that law enforcement, and I know Officer Morris can speak a little bit to this when he comes up. They feel disenfranchised that law enforcement is always going to take the other side, regardless of how the situation is going. But no, that's no longer true because there's so many advocates like us who know what the truth is, and we are shining a light and we are doing the work to educate our lawmakers, to educate our leaders, to educate law enforcement to know that, look, we have to get to the root of the matter and be able to identify who is the victim and who is the perpetrator. And it could swing either way. Thank you so much, Councilman. And another thing that you clearly stated is the fact that, the times that it takes the victims to come through, that is where we have the cycle of abuse, grooming. That's why we do the work to educate our kids, our families, to identify the signs of grooming. Because when we cut it off at grooming, we prevent a lot. And we're able to save more lives that way than having to be reactive. Yes, the reactions are good. We have the shelters, we have the law enforcement, we have all that. But the thing with reaction is the damage is already done. What we want to push for is a society that is more preventive, and we're able to help preserve the integrity of our community, our families, and our youth. So thank you so much for that. All right, the next speaker is going to be coming on right on because we definitely want to keep this going and make sure that we bring absolute value to our audience today, but we want to keep all of you engaged. So if you have any questions, I'm going to be going back to different platforms, looking at questions in the comments. And I do have questions that have already been sent in that I will be sharing with our speakers for today. Coming up next today is going to be our beautiful lady, Ms. Gabby Laredo. She is the voice and choice advocate with Traffic 911. Ms. Gabby Laredo she supports victims and survivors of child sex trafficking by meeting the children where they are and empowering them to choose healing at their own pace. Gabby uses that experience to empower youth to create healthy relationship bonds. Gabby began her journey in the criminal justice field as a correctional officer for Wine Unit State Prison, while obtaining a Bachelor of Science in Victim Studies, as well as a minor in Homeland Security and a minor in Human Services from Sam Houston State University. Prior to her journey with Traffic 911, Gabby was a Battering Intervention Prevention Program facilitator at the Family Place. There, she began to advocate for victims of domestic violence by facilitating psychoeducational programs for the groups of offenders of DV to practice accountability. Gabby believes that every human is deserving and worthy of dignity and respect, and continues to execute her passion of fighting for the voices of the youth to be heard with Traffic 911. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome to the stage Ms. Gabby Laredo for her wonderful keynote. Thank you so much, Ms. Gabby, for being here. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. O. Thank you so much for having us today. And I think these are just very dangerous topics to talk about in the sense that we notice that the community is lacking education. As Councilman stated, we have been around in the community and you hear comments often, we hear myths, we hear just the wrong statistics, the wrong education. So it is very important for us to talk about these today. And one of the main things that I would like to talk about is child sex trafficking. And that's what our organization focuses on, just educating and making sure that the youth are meeting the needs in that moment, and every need can be looking different. So I know a lot of the times child sex trafficking on social media or even in the movies, it's very false. The typical one that we see usually, it's a child getting abducted from Walmart and then getting held hostage. While that is some of the cases, that's the rare case. The majority of the cases probably come from what we call a guerrilla style trafficker, and the guerrilla style trafficker is the rare case, which is the one that uses violence to hold the children, to scare the children, to threaten the children, so that they do not leave. But the most common one is actually the Romeo style trafficker. So the Romeo style trafficker, he focuses on the grooming stages, which, similar to domestic violence, they use very similar tactics from the power and control wheel: isolation, manipulation, economic abuse, emotional abuse. All of these things they use to manipulate the child so that the child ends up getting attached. So what is child sex trafficking? A lot of the times people believe that the child has to be transported from one location to another for that to be considered child sex trafficking. Another one is that the child has to not give consent in order for that to be considered child sex trafficking. So that they have to be held against their will. However, child sex trafficking specifically refers to the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, obtaining, patronizing, or soliciting of a minor for the purpose of commercial sex. Okay, so as long as something is happening with the child when it comes to transportation, manipulation for the purpose of commercial sex, that is already considered child sex trafficking. I think sometimes we hear a lot of the times child prostitution. There's no such thing. The child cannot give consent to an adult. Even though in the mind of the child, they believe that that is what's happening, there's no such thing. So automatically that is considered child sex trafficking. So we notice that whenever we encounter the children, they are already under the understanding that there is some kind of vision already being implanted. And this vision is very beautiful. Picture the vision for you guys here: a beautiful home, beautiful house. We're gonna take vacations as much as we can to all of the beautiful places that we want to travel. I will protect you, I will keep you safe, and we'll have a beautiful family. And I'll give you everything. Okay. This is the vision that is being sold to the children, especially to children who are having so many vulnerabilities. A lot of the times the children are already out of the home. Okay, so they are runaways and they're running away from something at home, which could be DV. It could be a lot of other things. It could be substance use. So they're already running away from a vision that they do not like, and somebody comes and whispers in their ear this beautiful vision. And so then the youth begins to listen in and see what I have to do. And eventually it's like Councilman said, it's some kind of Stockholm syndrome relationship, to where they are so attached because they do feel safe with this person, regardless of the dangers that they see in the community, regardless of how many times they have been in a situation where they could have died. Regardless of all of the substance abuse that they have to take in order to continue to perform for the traffickers, they still believe that this is safer than whatever's going on at home. Okay. So what we do as advocates is we identify these relationship wounds, and we go ahead and try to rebuild a relationship bond with the child in a healthy way. So we meet them where they are, whether that looks like um, looking into education again. Okay, so that could be a GED program, that could be school enrollment, that could be just focusing on trade school at some point. It could also be something even more simple like food scarcity. Okay, and of course, through all of this, we're sprinkling in what they are looking for, which is love, which is empowerment. All of this is, we try to do a combination and we make a safety plan. So with the harm reduction model, we do help the children by planning safety ways to be out there in the community if they still continue to be in the life. We do our best to safety plan when it comes to shelters, having safety contacts, healthy relationships, even any kind of substance abuse harm reduction, such as educating them about Narcans. All of these things are very hard to hear sometimes because it feels like you are enabling these actions. But at the end of the day, it is reducing the harm that's happening in their life. So that is our goal. So as of today, we have served, as of 2023, we have served 322 youth, and we have done 96 crisis responses, which I'll go into in a second. And we have provided 2,363 services, which can look like transportation, food, groceries, medical appointments, etc. And they have reached 78% of the goals. A lot of the times we get the questions, well, what is a success rate? What does success look like? How do you measure success? And I think that's a really hard way of measuring things because there's just so many patterns in this life. So we look at the small wins. And if that looks like this kid ran away one time out of the month, and they usually run away 4 times out of the week, that's a win. That was a goal that they put in place. So that's how we measure the goals. Now, I want to talk a little bit about what our organization does to advocate. I remember when I first got into Traffic 911, I was very curious to see how advocating would look like for the children. So I immediately found out that it was an important need. I started to see the way sometimes professionals even talk about the children. They do not consider their voice. They do not consider what they would prefer in that moment. Lack of dignity. For example, just having the child walking around through medical in handcuffs in front of the whole waiting room. So there were so many things that we could advocate for just to protect the dignity and humanity of that child. So we have 2 parts to our job. The first part is a crisis response, and the second part is what we call the long haul love advocacy. So crisis response advocates have 60 minutes to respond to a recovery. Recovery is usually done by law enforcement, and it could be initiated by advocacy centers as well, as such as CPS or hospitals. So they call the advocate on call, and the advocate has 60 minutes to respond. A forensic interview is usually being done after that. The advocate makes sure that the child is aware of everything that's happening. And then after that, they make arrangements to go to medical, where they are able to find if they want to do any kinds of testing, such as STD testing, pregnancy testing, and even a SANE exam. And through all of this, the advocate is making sure that the child is knowledgeable of what is happening in this process. And at the end, they coordinate with all of the law enforcement or MDT coordinators, such as the care advocacy centers, to figure out a safe location for that child at the end of the day, which can look like back to their home. It can look like caregivers. It can look like a placement for the night. And so that is the crisis response part of our job. And that takes a good majority of how we meet the children. After this, we offer our services to just continue being there for the child, mentoring them, safety planning, and it is completely their voice and their choice, hence the name of our program. So we offer them the opportunity to make sure that this is something that is not forced, it's not mandatory, but we are here for you. And I think what helps a lot of the times is them knowing that we are not CPS, we are not law enforcement, we are not a social worker, but we are here to fill in the gaps and to make sure that their voice is heard through all of these agencies. The second part is the long haul love advocacy, which we like to call. And this part, we know that the children still need more needs. So whether that looks like showing them how to get resources from the food pantry, enrolling them back to school, following up with medical appointments, taking them or accompanying them to their criminal justice appointments. Anywhere where we can be present, the child now feels a little bit more empowered to know that they can do it and to know that they can get out of their previous situation. This takes a lot of time, a lot of just responsibility and determination to stay focused and to just make sure that the child is being met where they are. So we never pressure them to do anything that they don't want to do. because we believe that it comes naturally when they are ready. And so that is the overall gist of how we are there to support them. Through all of this, we are celebrating all of the goals that they have accomplished. So we usually have the goal celebrations tailored towards any kind of childhood activity, whether that's arcades, bowling, taking them out to nice restaurants, maybe new activities that they haven't done. And so all of that they're able to look forward to when they are completing these goals. Sometimes they come up with the goal celebrations first. And so we talk about, okay, what goals can we put in place for these goal celebrations? Overall, it is just so beautiful to see the growth of the child as they start to get their voice back. But at the same time, it can be very heavy. It can be very heavy to know everything that they have been through. It can be heavy to see how other professionals take away the dignity of the child. But that is what we are here for as advocates, to make sure that their voice and their dignity is respected throughout all of this time. So it is very important for us to know in the community that if we do see a child that is suffering from substance abuse, that they are running away, any kind of behavior that just looks like it's dangerous. There's a reason behind all of this. There's something that's going on. And so I would love to just, make sure that everybody is able to practice grace when it comes to children, because we were all children at one point of our life, and it's just still important to protect their dignity and their voice. Thank you all.
Thank you so much for all of the amazing work that you're doing, Ms. Gabby. Definitely goes without say that we are in need of more advocates that will speak, that the children can speak through you, and of course can understand and resonate how these kids are really feeling. One of the things I tell educators going into the school district is, when we go in and we try to work with the schools, they're like, well, Dr. O, there's certain things we can't talk about. There's certain things we can't address. I said, I understand. I said, well, as long as the school system continues to put a red tape on how we can help these kids, that is, we just want to come in and put a Band-Aid over the issue without really letting these kids feel like they can be heard, seen, and understood, and the issues addressed based on their terms. We're going to continue to recycle the damage that is being done, and we're never going to solve the problem. That is just my thought. I've been an educator with Dallas ISD, and I was just like, okay, if I'm really going to be a community advocate, I need to get out of the system so I can help heal the system. And that's what I did. So thank you so much for all that you do. All right, we're going to take a quick intermission, and I just want to play a short video just for us and for the organization that I serve. And once we do that, we're going to quickly move on to our very next speaker that we have saved. Let's just say we saved the best for last. Please hang tight and let's watch this video. Hopefully technology helps me. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month in the United States. And Honey Drops Foundation, being a community advocate in North Texas for over 9 years, will be contributing our quota to helping raise awareness to the issues that surround domestic violence in our global community. Okay. So we are just going to move on. The technology is not moving forward, so that's fine. Sometimes that happens, and that's to be expected. So we definitely want to keep going. The party must go on. All right, so I'm going to bring up our next speaker. We're going to bring up our next speaker, and we are going to bring up our next speaker, who is Officer Morris. And while I share his beautiful bio, Assistant Chief Morris has served with the Grand Prairie Police Department since January 1st, 2000, after serving with two previous police agencies for 4 years. Over the last nearly 30 years, Assistant Chief Morris has served with distinction and has demonstrated record of success in building community partnerships, increasing transparency and trust, enhancing inclusiveness, in and improving service delivery and developing leadership at every level. Chief Morris has broad and extensive experience in all aspects of modern municipal law enforcement, substantial executive and command level leadership experience, and completion of multiple law enforcement executive development programs such as SMIP, FBI, Command College, and the LEMIT Leadership Series. He holds a master's degree in justice administration. In addition to serving on multiple boards and committees, Chief Morris is an advocate for the personalization of law enforcement, as well as being a staunch advocate for the child victims of domestic dating violence, child abuse, and sex trafficking. In 2021, Chief Morris authored a bill, the Christine Bluebird Act, which was later adopted by the Texas legislature and signed into law by the governor. The law requires all public school districts in the state of Texas to provide a block of instruction to all middle and high school students on the dangers of dating violence. Chief Morris has been married for 20 years and has two beautiful teenage daughters. Chief Morris, I am so honored to have you here with us today. Thank you so much, first of all, for all the work that you do to serve our community. Thank you so much for being a positive, reassuring face for law enforcement. We are grateful. The floor is yours.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that. I would like to start by saying it's very humbling to be part of this panel of some really great people that are doing a lot to shine a light on something that our society really wants to keep in the dark. And to be the voice for victims is something that is notable, and I wish everybody the greatest success. And I thank you, my heartfelt gratitude to everything that everybody is doing. I hate to start off with a statistic, but there was a conversation a little while ago with Councilman Uzano, and we were talking about how men were feeling that they were being attacked on this, right? And that they feel that unfairly. Well, I do want to say that even though it is true that men are victims of domestic and dating violence, that it is very true. 90% of the victims are women, which says what? That roughly 90% of the abusers are men. So, you gotta when you're pointing a finger, you got four more pointing back at you, right? So, I mean, we need to understand that this is the reality. In my nearly 30 years of being in law enforcement and all of the domestic and dating violence situations that I've had to intervene in, it has followed that track to the letter. So it's an unchanging statistic, and it's the reality whether men want to accept it or not. But when we're talking about victims who really are in no position to help themselves because of the psychological torment that they are under, among many other things, we have to address the men because they're the vast majority of the abusers. So I really appreciated that point that was made, because I think it's more true than what people really even want to realize. So thank you for that. I want to give the story a little bit of the Christine Blueball Act that you referenced at the beginning. Back in 2000, I was a very young police officer. I'd been an officer just shy of 4 years. And by that time, I'd seen pretty much the worst that society has to throw at you, right? I mean, it doesn't take long in this profession to see that side of our society. But on March 25th of 2000, I responded to a call that really affected me at the time greatly, being a 24-year-old kid. and really affected me through us sitting here talking today. Received a call for a suspicious vehicle down at one of our city parks on the south side of town. We went down there, and it was the scene of a murder-suicide where the uh, suspect, a male, had shot his girlfriend in the head twice with a 12 gauge shotgun and then killed himself. Um, and that victim was Christine Bluebaugh. Christine was a 16-year-old girl here in Grand Prairie who was a junior in high school, played tennis, worked at McDonald's, had a lot of friends, had a twin sister, had a very loving family. And seeing something like that was very jarring. And um, you try to move on from it, but for 25 years, it has just been in my mind. So I went about my law enforcement career doing the things that I do, and constantly kind of thinking about that. I think God really put it on my heart for that to stay with me. So fast forward, and I'm married, and I've got teenage daughters. And my oldest daughter is in middle school. She's 13, taking health class, and looks a lot like Christine Bluebaugh. And every day when my kids come home, I ask them, "Hey, what'd you do in school today?" I don't just say, "Hey, how was your day?" "Yeah, good day," whatever. No, what'd you do? What'd you learn? What'd you do in math class? What'd you do in English class? Well, every day I would get to health class, and they would tell me, uh, she'd say, "Well, we watched a movie today." Okay, okay, you know, health class, coach is teaching it, whatever. Next day, what'd you do in health class? Well, we watched another movie. So, I started thinking, I said, wow, she has a lot of time in health class. I think they could be doing some things that are better. And that's when I started thinking of Christine Bluebaugh again. And I said, you know what? Health class would be a great opportunity to educate our kids on the dangers of dating violence. And I started really thinking that how could I use my platform and the position that I have to affect some sort of change on a macro scale, statewide scale, that could potentially protect our kids. And I need to say, I never knew Christine Bluebaugh's family, but I reached out to her mother, who happens to still live in the same house that she lived in when Christine was killed. And I reached out to her, and I said, "Miss Bluebaugh, this is what I'm thinking. I think we need to have a law that requires kids in middle school and high school to receive education on dating violence. Um, and I would love to have your support. And two, I would love to name it in honor of your daughter." And she obviously was 100% behind it. So I met her, and I met Dawn, Christine's twin sister, and looking, and this is what Christine would look like today if she was still here. So it was almost like talking to Christine herself. And I learned about Christine's relationship, and I learned the abuse and the patterns that occurred that no one recognized, but were so typical of an abusive relationship. So Christine started dating this boy when she was 16. She dated him about a year. Well, throughout the relationship, he abused her both emotionally and physically. And there were moments when he would punch her, or he would slam her face into a mirror. And this continued through the duration of her relationship. Well, Christine didn't know how to react to this. She didn't come from a house that had abuse. So this was not new to her. The only thing she knew for certain is that she loved this boy with all she had, and that somebody that she loved and trusted so much was also hurting her. And she didn't know how to react to it. She did what most victims do. They'll internalize it and say, what am I doing wrong? What have I done that has turned this person that loves me so much and I love so much to, I need to regulate my behaviors, is what a lot of victims will think. And, but that's obviously not uh, true. She wasn't doing anything. She was completely innocent, and through no fault of her own, found herself in this abusive relationship. So she felt the shame and the guilt that an embarrassment that goes along with getting yourself into a relationship, which her mother and father weren't real happy about. So, it's hard to admit that when you're a teenager, my parents were right. But whenever you're navigating a very adult situation as a child whose brain is not even fully developed yet, you know, how do you reach out for help? She didn't know. No one had ever spoken to her about dating violence or domestic violence. She had never seen it. As a matter of fact, there's a statistic that 81% of parents in the state of Texas either don't know that dating violence is an issue, or they really don't care. They just want to hide because they don't want to think about those things when you think about your children. So Christine had nobody to tell. And besides, if she was going to tell somebody, who would she tell? She would tell her friends. Well, her friends are 15, 16, 17-year-old girls who also don't know anything about dating violence or how to escape it. So she made a couple of outcries to some friends, but of course they didn't know what to do. Um, but she did something that is very courageous and brave that many victims do. She got up the courage to end that relationship in her mind. She broke up with him because she couldn't take the abuse any longer. But what people don't know when you're in an abusive relationship is that the most abusive and most dangerous time in that relationship is when you decide to leave. So in her mind, she's removing herself from a situation of somebody that she loves. But how do you actually ever really separate yourself from somebody when you have math class with them? When you go to the same school, you are a captive to them, and there's nothing you can do. So she did what she could. She got away. She went to the junior prom, and without him with some friends and had a great time. Well, she had some plans that night that fell through, that she was killed, and he had ended up calling her and said, "Hey, can we just go out to dinner or to a movie, just as friends?" Well, in her mind, you are my friend, and I still love you and I care about you. What could possibly be the harm? So she did. She went out with him that night. She hugged and kissed her mother goodbye, told her she'd be back home around 11 o'clock, and never came home. And her family has been forever affected by this, and touched in a way that really most people could never fathom, in losing a 16-year-old child. But in my estimation, the greatest weapon that we have to protect our kids is education. So we would never allow our 15, 16-year-old kid to get a driver's license and go drive a car down the highway before they learn how to drive, before they're giving some level of education on the dangers of driving, the dangers of other drivers and how they could potentially affect you and cause harm to you. And then when they demonstrate that they're ready, then we let them drive a car. In my opinion, dating is no different. Our kids need to understand what the red flags are that would be driving them down the path to being a victim, or taking you down the path to even being an abuser, so that you will know what those resources are that are available to you, that if through no fault of your own you find yourself in an abusive relationship, you know who to contact, you know where to go. We say in law enforcement that the body won't go where the mind hasn't been. And we train that, and we train that, and we train. So we're constantly thinking, if this happens, then I'll do this. If this happens, then I'll do this. It's the same strategy that I would like to impart to kids, that your mind won't go where your body, or your body won't go where your mind hasn't been. So let's give these sponges that are sitting in school all the information that they can have, to where they can recognize if they're going down that path. So I'm not a politician. I've never written a law in my life, but I sat down at this desk that I'm sitting at right now, and I wrote how I thought a law should look. And I contacted our local senator, Senator Royce West, and I said, "Senator, I have a bill that I've written. I'd like for you and your staff to look at it, and I would like for you to sponsor this legislation. And zero hesitation, I'm in. And we took that through the process, and it met with a lot of resistance, a lot, because again, people don't want to acknowledge that our kids are in this type of danger. And also, if it was political and there was more Democrats that were victims or there were more Republicans that were victims, one side or the other would jump on and they would advocate for it, right? But domestic violence, dating violence is no respecter of persons. It doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter what your race or your gender or your educational status. It doesn't care. It's a free for all. Anyone can be affected by this. But we just don't want to talk about it because it's dirty, right? It's dirty, and we don't want to see that about the people in our communities. And but it made it through, and the governor vetoed it. The legislature passed it, and the governor vetoed it, and we had to go through a lot of special sessions and embarrassing the governor to jump on board and actually show him how important it actually is, and that we can save lives with this law if it were to pass. And ultimately, he heard and he passed it. So now every middle school student in a public school in the state of Texas, when they're in middle school and when they're in high school, they receive a block of instruction on the dangers and red flags associated with dating violence. Am I going down the road of being a victim? Am I going down the road of being an abuser? Here's ways to check yourself, to protect yourself, and resources that you have to reach out. Further, the law requires every middle school and high school to have a policy on how they are to handle and deal with an abusive relationship in their school. Remember when I said if you're trapped in English class or math class with your abuser, now the schools have to take action on that. They have a responsibility and they have a part to play to ensure that the person who is being abused is protected. And I think that goes a long way. And they're required to have publicly posted information around the school, easily accessible to all students on resources to escape an abusive relationship. So I firmly believe that although Christine, she's more than a statistic, she's more than just a girl who was murdered by her ex-boyfriend. And what I love more than anything, and what I praise God for, is that her family no longer has to see her as our daughter, our sister, our friend who was murdered and nothing could be done. Instead, her legacy now and forevermore in the state of Texas will be a legacy of saving the lives of other kids in her school and other schools around the state. And it's probably, if I had to look back on 30 years in law enforcement, it is probably my greatest accomplishment that I'm the most proud of.
That is definitely worth all the accolades and the applause and everything, because I'm listening to you. I've heard the story before, but I'm listening to you narrate it in the first person account and all that you had to go through, and the fact that you say that is your legacy, and really it will be your legacy, because we live in a world where we want to make everything pretty and nice. Unfortunately, life is not pretty and nice. And, when I got into the community advocacy space doing this work in domestic violence, even within my own community, nobody, they're like, why are you doing this? Nobody even wanted to be associated with it. The worst part was even the victims, the people who had suffered and were suffering the issues, did not want to be associated with it. They didn't want to lend their voice to say, let's amplify this message and get the help that our people need. And when it comes to the youth, these children, they are a generation that truly needs someone who's going to speak for them and be able to help them understand. And that is why we created our system at the Honey Drops Foundation to say that we not just want to create a solution, but we want to make our youth, our teenagers, a part of the solution. So we started this whole program called the Teen Dating Violence Awareness Conference. And I believe, Councilman Ezeonu, you being here today, we already started conversations about collaborating across city lines to bring together the very first citywide teen dating violence conference, which are teenagers. We've done it. We have the blueprint. Our teenagers, our youth, are speakers at these conferences. We've had many, versions of them. But my vision, the one that God has given me, and I still hold it so dear to my heart, is to be able to have a citywide conference where this can be an annual thing, where the Christian Blue Board, that would be something that could be championed at that conference to let people know and understand why this happened. Why do we have this law in place? And students, I tell you, even though the law has been passed, I can tell you for free that the trickle-down effect and the implementation in schools have not happened. It hasn't happened. Districts are still against coming in and sharing the truth about this matter. They want you to come in and graze over the issue. They want you to come in and do an activity. I'm like, no, activities are not going to solve this. We need to talk about the issue and let these kids understand. Let's trust them enough to know that they can handle the reality that they get to face when they are not equipped. Let us equip them so that they can face it and they are prepared to protect themselves and to avoid these situations. But the fight continues and the advocacy continues for us to help our kids learn what they need to learn. Because what I've always said is education is the tool. It's the weapon, it's the biggest weapon that we have, and we need to use it right. So thank you so much, Officer Morris. Thank you, Councilman Ezeonu, for the work that you're doing in our cities. Thank you so much, Ms. Gabby, for helping our youth be heard, be seen, understood, and getting the help to them where they need it the most. So we're going to quickly transition this program to some questions that I have for the panel. So I'm going to bring us all up. Let's all come together and try to answer some of these questions. And in no particular order, one of the things that I see when it comes to the issue of domestic violence is cultural barriers. We're Africans, Hispanics, Caucasians represented on here. What are some of the cultural barriers that we have faced as leaders? And how can we help our society understand that this is not a cultural issue? Because there are certain ethnicities and cultures that would have a vow of silence when it comes to these issues. It's absolute. You don't talk about it, you don't report it, you don't speak on it. But this is not a cultural issue, like I always say. Even though we have the SDG goals with the United Nations that we address gender-based violence, we do understand and acknowledge that. This is not even a gender-based issue. This is a human issue, human problem issue. So how do we bring down those cultural barriers that inhibit us from getting the work done that we're trying to do and getting the help to the people who need to be helped? I would leave it open to any of the panelists to try to help us shed some light and answer this question. Thank you so much.
Well, if you don't mind, I can give you perspective just from law enforcement. Grand Prairie is a very, very diverse city. And a lot of people don't realize that we're, right in the middle of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. I mean, in the middle of nearly 8 million people, and the diversity of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex is immense, and that's very true for here in Grand Prairie as well. Throughout the years, we will have interactions with victims and abusers from different cultures where honestly abuse is acceptable. And it is a form of control in the family to ensure that the man is the head of the household, and a lot of times some cultures will do it through violence. And I think what you mentioned a while ago about education really being the key that will unlock a lot of this is it's going to take. I'm not a big government guy, but it is going to take intervention, in my opinion, of the government, who specifically more local governments, to have educational opportunities for their communities, to actually show these different cultures that see that as an acceptable way of living in a family dynamic, that it's not acceptable, that they're people. You're not supposed to hurt people that you love. There's different ways to be the leader of a family, instead of inspiring your family to fear you. So I think we do a really good job here in Grand Prairie of doing that. We do it. We have a lot of discussions. I think we're probably among the best, and maybe even a model of governments that really sees the importance of this. But even the best can get better. So we have room where we can improve. But I think the educational piece of actually going and seeing and meeting these people where they are and showing them that, one, that's not the American way, right? This is the way that we recognize that domestic violence, dating violence, sex trafficking, this is not the way that we live. And here's the alternatives that you have. And if you choose not to take these alternatives, then unfortunately the reality is my folks are going to step in and do something about that. So, that those types of things need to be hit home, that there are consequences, but you don't have to live through them. There's other ways to do this.
Thank you so much, Officer Morris. Anybody else wants to chime in on that question on culture and the impact that it has on the effect of our work and how we can kind of reduce that?
Sure. So, just like Officer Morris mentioned, a lot of it comes down to core beliefs. Inside of being culturally aware, there's so many core beliefs that are still not being um, they're still not being educated on. If we look at machismo in the Hispanic culture, for example, and some things that I like to do personally is call it out, holding others accountable, just being able to provide space for education, and hearing their perspective. And it's not going to be a one-time thing. It's going to be every single time that we hear this, every single time that we see it in the community, in our family, in our friends, in social media. Every single time we have to be consistent. And I think that's definitely hard because people can look at you just as somebody who's attacking every single time. But at the same time, that's how change happens. Change happens when you're consistent. Change happens when you're able to hold others accountable and call out these core beliefs that we see. And I think a lot of the core beliefs that I see inside of human trafficking and domestic violence is entitlement. Entitlement, not necessarily from specifically a culture, but from that person believing that I am better in this situation, to either take advantage of you, or to use you, or to abuse you, or to threaten you, whatever it is, I can do so. And just like Officer Morris said, your body will not do anything that your mind doesn't have. So if your core belief is that, then it will drive that action. So if we are able to acknowledge and pick out these red flags, in school with the youth, with the younger adults, if we're able to point them out and say, hey, this core belief can lead to this action, and we think about replacing it with respect, for example. So I think if we are able to be very much aware of these core beliefs that are behind these actions, we're able to point it out and hold others accountable, provide space for education as well.
I'm not sure if Dr. O dropped off, or I'm not sure what happened, but just to echo what Chief Morris and Ms. Laredo stated, I think those core beliefs do play a part, but it's impressive to see in our society now the stigma is slowly withering away when it comes to people reporting domestic violence issues. Same thing like with mental health. At one point, mental health crises were people were afraid to go and get therapy, go and get the help that they need, go and voice out that I've dealt with this issue. But now we're seeing folks are more comfortable. And it's because we've created space for it. Social media is now pushing for people to go to therapy for mental health. And we're seeing the similar thing with domestic violence. Folks are no longer, there's still an issue, there's still stigma, but the stigma is withering away. People are becoming more and more comfortable across cultures. And I think it's our job to continue to be advocates for the unheard and the afraid, and people that aren't confident or comfortable voicing that this has happened to me. And we have to show them that you're not, it's not your fault. That's the biggest thing. It's not your fault that this has occurred. And also, you speaking up, speaking out can help prevent it from happening to the next person. So I think we're making strides in that. It's going to take some time because a lot of immigrant cultures are, like Ms. Laredo said, very machismo, macho focused, and the man does everything and the man can't do any wrong. But that's changing. And it's just going to take time to fully transition to where we give everyone that same opportunity.
Thank you so much. I apologize. My technology, my connection just took me off myself. But you know what? The devil is a liar. This work is important. It's God's work for God's people, and we are all God's children. And I'm so glad that we all get to do this and we understand the urgency and the importance of what we're doing. As we round off the event today, I want each of our speakers to leave us with some parting words. What are some of the things that we can really help our communities understand from each of our standpoints, how they can see us as a resource, or what are some of the things that we can definitely leave them with today to spread some hope? Because a lot of people who might be in this situation might feel hopeless and they just feel like, okay, all this sounds well and good, but nobody understands my situation. And this help cannot really get to me where I'm at. So let's just leave everyone with parting words today, some things that could really help encourage our audience. And if there's a call to action that you want to make, please feel free to do that as well, because we definitely need to leave some actionable, real-time adaptable solutions. That's what we're about at the Honey Drops Foundation. Real-time adaptable in the sense that it has to evolve with the changing times and it has to be usable at any moment in time for anyone who needs it. So please, let's round up and let's just give our parting words and we'll be able to know that today has been well spent.
Yeah, I'll make a quick comment. And Dr. O, I just want to again congratulate you and thank you for setting this up and creating the space for us to come and speak and share ideas as to how to address this issue. And for me, what I would leave anybody that's listening is the concept and my theory of empathy. When I say empathy, I mean understanding that you may not understand. What does that mean? Sometimes when we look at folks that are dealing with crises, whether it's mental health, it's domestic violence, it's different issues, we wonder, why doesn't this person go get help? Why doesn't this person go and address this issue? Why is this person leaving himself in this situation? I've tried to assist them, but they don't want to listen or whatnot. And we lack the understanding that we don't understand. We're not in their shoes. We're not living their life. We have not dealt with some of the trials and tribulations that they've dealt with. So what I'm trying to say is I want to encourage anyone that knows somebody that's going through this, offer help, but understand that it may take you offering it for the fifth or sixth time for them to receive your help or your support, but be there and be someone that's always going to listen. If they want to call and vent, lend your ear and not always voice out some piece of advice, because sometimes people just need to feel heard. And over time, they may get to the point where they're ready to receive the assistance. And it's just important for us to create a safe space for folks to be comfortable to talk. Because sometimes we can get to a point where we're condemning and we're judging, and we're perceived as more of a judgmental resource and not as a friend, a compassionate individual that can help someone through it. So I would just advise on being empathetic and understanding that we can't always understand why and how things happen and why people are in situations that they're in. But through empathy, we can help them overcome that and get to the point of becoming a survivor and not a victim. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much, sir. All right, in no particular order, anyone else who's ready to go on and leave us with their parting words? Ms. Gabby, you want to go next?
Sure. So again, thank you all for just joining this wonderful and beautiful conversation that we're able to have here today. And I specifically like to thank the men in this, because a lot of the time, especially when I was working in BIP, as a facilitator, it was definitely hard to get one guy in the group to be accountable. It was hard. But once I was able to see that one guy, it slowly started to trickle down. Other people started to see different perspectives. Other people started to hold themselves accountable. And so I think that's the beauty of it, if especially when we are able to see men speak on these topics and they're able to stand up and they're able to talk about it and hold each other accountable, that's when we start to see a big difference, and it trickles down into generations. It slowly starts to attack all of the cultural beliefs, all of the core beliefs, because they are now getting replaced with something like respect, something like dignity. So that's a huge, huge win in our generation, just to start seeing men slowly have a voice towards these topics. This ends up creating our generation into becoming really good leaders. And as we see, these cultural beliefs didn't just accumulate over time. Machismo came from a long, long time ago, and it didn't stop, right? So if we can attack that, replace it with something different today, it ends up creating new leaders. It ends up creating children with different core beliefs. So obviously, as we know, this is something that is not going to be abolished, but if we can start slowly having that other side be heard. And lastly, no one is immune to domestic violence. No one is immune to human trafficking. It can happen to anyone. A lot of the times, I would hear through the domestic violence world, I don't understand how this person got manipulated. I would hear it through other women sometimes shame the victims as well, saying, I don't understand why she keeps going back. I hear it from parents talking about the children. I don't understand why she keeps going back. And so just like Councilman said, we don't understand and we can't understand. We have to stay away from that savior's mindset that we can save people, because that then still falls into the core belief of entitlement, that we are still better than them. So to protect their dignity, to protect their humanity, we do have to offer that space, that empathy to just whenever they are ready, okay? It comes naturally. So lastly, just to have hope, to give grace, to be present, and to never stop. Because yes, although for the DV world, it may take about 7 times, in the human trafficking world, it may take years for you to get out of that. It can take a really long time. And I think one of the biggest things that I hear from both domestic violence survivors and human trafficking survivors is, at the end, there was no one for me. At the end, everybody gave up on me. At the end, they were tired of hearing my stories. At the end, they were so mad at me for going back over and over and over again that at the end, I was alone. And remember, this is a key tactic to both sides, is isolation. Isolating the person from their support system, okay? So if we are able to have one person in their support system, obviously protect our mindset, protecting our heart, but if we are able to just be present, I think that makes a lot of difference. If we are consistent, that person will eventually, at their time, be ready to heal. Thank you all.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you. At the end, it was just me. And, just like Councilman said, just always be available. I know it's hard. We're human. We have our threshold. But, hopefully there's someone in every network who can wait it out and just let it ride out and hopefully help that person. All right, sir.
Well, like everyone else, I would like to thank you for the invitation to come here. Anytime that we're able to shine a light on something that is constantly and intentionally kept in the dark, I think that that is a very positive thing. I'd also like to say, Gabby, I appreciate everything that you're doing with the sex trafficking in that arena. We could have a whole other panel on sex trafficking, child sex trafficking. I was a supervisor of many years ago of our um, vice unit where we actually were the tip of the spear here in Grand Prairie for human trafficking. And prior to even getting that unit, I never even knew the term. And I got a very quick and sad education, real world. So thank you for everything that you do in that area. I actually have two parting thoughts. One, talk to your kids. You know, laws for teachers and in schools to educate your kids on human trafficking, sex trafficking, dating violence, domestic violence. That's great, and I think it will save lives. But nobody has more credibility with their kids than their parents. So parents need to take that responsibility seriously and have tough conversations with your kids, because they will listen to you and it may just save your child's life. And also, our goal is to break the cycle before it ever begins when we're talking about dealing with children. So, let's do our part to rid this country of this 100% preventable scourge that has absolutely devastated so many families in our country. Secondly, um, I would like for people to know that um, historically there has been a lot of mistrust in law enforcement when it comes to how we deal with victims of domestic violence. I remember very vividly when I was a kid, and my mother was a victim of domestic violence, and the police would get called and nothing would happen. And then things would just go right back. And that was really a black eye on law enforcement. But when you know better, you do better. And over the career that I've had, I have seen law enforcement really shift from thinking that domestic and dating violence and things like that, intimate partner violence, are just that's a home privacy issue with you, and we're not going to get involved in your family, to, you know what, we're going to intervene. We're going to intervene even if the victim doesn't want to prosecute, because they might not be in the position to, out of fear or psychological trauma, that they're not willing to prosecute. Well, we're going to do that on your behalf. And then we're not just going to be an advocate and a resource for you at the time that we caused this disruption in your family, but we're actually going to be a partner with you that will stand shoulder to shoulder and walk with you as you navigate a very scary process of trying to remove yourself from that situation. And we talked about the culture piece a while ago. A lot of cultures have an inherent fear of law enforcement just from their own country, from the corrupt nature of law enforcement. So a lot of times they won't even reach out to us or even think that we're a resource or an advocate. So I'm very proud of what law enforcement has done, but like I said a while ago, even the best can get better. And we're going to continually work to professionalize law enforcement and make sure that this issue is kept at the very top, because these are victims of significance. These are real victims that are living in their own personal hell every single day, and their kids are going along with them on that journey, and it's very sad. But we are here as a resource, as an advocate, as a partner, and we take that very seriously. So please, if you need someone to reach out to, I would urge you to tell anyone you trust. But if, like Gabby said a while ago, if you're left alone and everyone has left you, I promise you we'll be here to help you, and just reach out.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much to everyone. I want to take some time to thank all of our speakers for today. Councilman Ezeonu, Deputy Mayor Pro Tem for the City of Grand Prairie. Deputy Chief Morris, we are grateful for your service. Ms. Gabby Laredo, thank you so much for serving our community at large. We are super grateful. The Honey Drops Foundation and the Honey Drops Foundation Africa remains resolved in our position and our mission to continue to elevate, empower, and educate our teenagers, our youth, and families to live beyond teen dating violence, domestic, and sexual abuse. We are so grateful for the opportunity to be able to serve on this panel today. We hope that you have learned a thing or two and you have taken some valuable points to understand that there are resources everywhere. Help is always available. Regardless of gender, race, ethnicity, there is no bias. Help is always available. Never be afraid to reach out. 911 is your best call. Make that call and you will be redirected to whatever organization or body of agency that will be responsible to sending you the quickest, fastest, most reliable help that you need. Thank you so much for celebrating Domestic Violence Awareness Month with us. But I believe that it's not just in October, it's a daily thing. It's 365 days a year. Let us continue to advocate. Let us continue to amplify the voices of those who cannot amplify their voices. Those that cannot speak for themselves, let us continue to speak for them. We are going to continue to help partner with our schools and our municipals to help educate our teenagers, to help them learn how to become peer advocates to one another. Because in our 9 years journey, we have learned in our system that our program works best because we incorporate teenagers to becoming peer advocates. Teenagers will listen to other teenagers. Teenagers would resonate with the stories that come from other teenagers, and they will learn from that. And that is our model of operation. So once again, I just want to say thank you to all our panelists as we bring this meeting to a close. Have a wonderful and blessed rest of your weekend. My name is Dr. Oyinkansola Ajinodu. If you want to partner with us and help us, be a volunteer, donate to the Honey Drops Foundation. Our website is below this video. We are always open to receiving help and partnering with other advocates and organizations out there who are looking to champion this cause along with us on a global scale. Have a wonderful day, everyone. God bless everybody. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye, guys. Have a wonderful day. Bye, everyone.